Good evening. This week's Parsha is Parshas Chayei. As we know that the beginning of the Seder deals with the Petira, with the death of Sarah Imenu. So why would we call the Seder Chayei, the life of Sarah? It doesn't say one thing about her activities or anything. It only talks about her Petira. So why would we call it Chayei? But the truth is that when a person lives here in Olam Hazeh, in this physical world, and their days are then filled with whatever the gift of life was from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it was for 50 years or 80 years or 110 years, that after the person is nifter, the actions and activities of his life, it withers away the nonsense. In other words, if a person was busy looking at magazines or all that, and that's how they were spending their life, that's not what people remember and look back and reminisce to their achievements and it's the actual substance that remains. And that's why Chayei, it's called Chayei, the life of Sarah, because it was so packed and filled with goodness and with Avodas Hashem, and having brought up a son like Yitzchak, that's why we call the Seder Chayei, the life, because it's the beautiful texture of how she lived and what she lived for that remains fresh and constant in our minds. Now, we know that it says that the Akeidah, most hold the Akeidah took place on Yom Kippur. And that when the story was over and that Yitzchak was not shechted, that Avram Avinu came back, and it took him 3 days to get home. So from Yom Kippur until Sukkot, which only has 4 days in between, he came home, was Erev Sukkot. So he came home to a commotion and to learn that his wife was nifter, and he had to bury her and begin the merchandising, the handling of her kvura with the Bnei Ches and Ephron, who was their representative. And that answers why there is a small chof, v'livkosa, v'yavo Avram, lispod l'sara v'livkosa. And the Mefarshim all ask it, to cry for her, it has in that word, v'livkosa, a small chof. Why? But the answer is that when a person, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, sits Shiva, it's a 7-day procedure that takes place. But what happens if Yom Tiv, a person buries someone, and a few hours later is Yom Tiv? So the Yom Tiv cuts off the Shiva. So Avram Avinu only had an hour or two of Shiva because it was Sukkot. It was Erev Sukkot when he got home to do the burial. And that's why there is a small chof, because there was no full Shiva that he could sit for Sarah Imenu because it was Erev Yom Tiv. Now we know that there is a distinguished difference between Pesach and Sukkot. If someone in the family passes on and it's Erev Pesach, they go to the cemetery, they bury the person, and then the family sits in the cemetery, the Shiva, the hour, the 2 hours, and then it's Erev Yom Tov. And Yom Tov takes off the Shiva. Erev Sukkot is different. Because even though Sukkot takes off the Shiva, but Shmini Atzeres at the end of Yom Tov is a regel bifnei atzma. It's a separate Yom Tov. So when the Shiva is cut off by the first days of Sukkot, the next 7 days of Sukkot take off another 7 days from the Shloishim. And then the regel bifnei atzma, the Shmini Atzeres, takes off another 7. So after Yom Tov, there's only remaining 5 or 6 days of actual Shloishim, which does not happen during Pesach. But Avram Avinu didn't have to sit a full Shiva because of this reason. Now the pasuk says, "Vayavo Avraham lispod l'sara v'livkosa," that Avram Avinu came. Vayavo Avram lispod, to eulogize l'sara v'livkosa, and to cry. So we just answered why there's a small chof, because the crying was not so much, because there was no full Shiva. But the question the Medrash asks is, why does it say Vayavo Avram, and he came? And the Medrash asks, Mehechan hu ba, where was he coming from? And the Medrash answers and says, Mehar HaMoriah, from the story of the Akeidah. Now we understand that the last Sedra ended with a complete story that we learn on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And as a matter of fact, Reb Chaim Sanzer used to go around his table on Parshas Vayera, which was 7 weeks after Rosh Hashanah, and he used to say to every person at the table, on Shabbos Parshas Vayera, Ksiva v'chasima tova, to every person there. Now Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Hoshana Rabbah all finished long before. But he explained that since both days of Rosh Hashanah, the Kriyas HaTorah, is from Parshas Vayera, from Vashem Pokad Esora Kasher Omar, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and then the Akeidah Vayhi Achrei Advarim Ha'ela, V'ho Elokim Nisa Es Avraham, that he tested Avram Avinu with the Akeidah. That's the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So we see that a chelik of the Avodah, said Reb Chaim Sanzer, is Rosh Hashanah, the Kriya of Vayera, because on every Shabbos or every Yom Tov, the Kriya is part, it's etched into the essence of the Yom Tov. That means it's not just davening, it's listening to Kriyas HaTorah. And Kriyas HaTorah comes from a source that's even higher than the davening. So he explained that since it is the Sedra that was designated Min HaShamayim to be the Kriya of Rosh Hashanah, so into the actual ingredients and characteristics of Rosh Hashanah is embedded into the Kriya, which is Parshas Vayera. And that is why he said, Ksiva v'chasima tova, on Shabbos Vayera, long after Rosh Hashanah. But it says that the Medrash I was quoting to you, that Avram, Vayavo Avram, he was coming from Hara Moriah. We know that. We know that he had the story of the Akeidah, and that even Yitzchak, on his way to the Akeidah, learned that he was to be shechted, and still Vayelchu Shaneim Yachtov, that they still both went with the fervor and the vigor and the spirit of simcha to do the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That means even though he found out midway that he's going to be the one that's the carbon, he still did not think or ask any questions. And it was the simcha of doing the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we know that. So why does it have to say Vayavo Avram? He was coming from Hara Moriah. But the answer the Meforshim say is that Hara Moriah, the Akeidah, remained a cementing factor in the Mahus, the backbone of Klal Yisrael. Every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we talk about Zechor Avraham va'Akeidas Yitzchak. It's not just one thing. Look in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah of so many things that happened, and we don't mention it on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or Sukkot. But a staple of Klal Yisrael is the Akeidah. Why is there so much stress given to the Akeidah? And the answer is because the shleimus and the completion of Avram Avinu's life in this world in pace setting what would be good and important for the structure of the daily lives of every Yid until the Geula Shlema, Avram Avinu wanted to make sure that all the ingredients were there. Part of the ingredients was he had to go through 10 tests. And most hold that the final and 10th test was the Akeidah. Would he do it with the Simcha? Would he come up with a slew of questions? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you promised me my children will have, and even though he had Yishmael, but we understand that Yishmael was not the main son. The main son that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised him everything was Yitzchak. And now he's about to shecht Yitzchak. So he could have had some very strong question about what was happening, both Avram and Yitzchak. But there was no question. And he was coming from Hara Moriah, and what the Medrash wants to say is that he could have had all these questions, and there could have been an unbelievable level of a pile of inquiry of what's happening here and what happened. But he came off Hara Moriah with the full schus, without a machshava of why and what. That's why it says Vayavo Avram. He was coming from Hara. He was coming loaded with the schus of the Akeidah, and to underscore it, and to emphasize it, and to have it cemented into the backbone of Klal Yisrael as one of the most outstanding schusim to ever have had happen with Klal Yisrael. Now we know that the Satan was dying to take away this chus. That's why when the Medrash says that he whispered into the ear of Sarah Imenu, oh, do you know where your husband is now? He's in Yerushalayim, on Har Moriah, and he took the chalaf, he took the sharp knife to shecht Yitzchak. Porcha nishmasa. She died and was nifter on the spot. So Rabbeinu Yoina, who was a Rishon, he says that the biggest nisoyan of Avram Avinu was when he came home and found out that Sarah Imenu passed away. And he didn't hold, and he was a Rishon, he didn't hold that the Akeidah was the 10th and final nisoyan. He held that the Akeidah was the 9th test, the 9th nisoyan. But the 10th and final nisoyan was to come home and to find out that Sarah Imenu passed away, that the Malach whispered into her ear, that do you know where your husband and your son are? And then the Malach told her, and she passed away. Avram Avinu could have come home and said, Rabbana Shalom, I just was ready to give my one and only son Besimcha. And this is the thank you? I come home to find out that my wife was nifter, that Sarah Imenu died? The machshava even did not only didn't say anything, the machshava did not come into his mind. So says Rabbeinu Yoina that was even a bigger nisayon than the Akeidah. Now most do not hold that. Most hold that it was the Akeidah was the 10th and the final. But Rabbeinu Yoina held no, that there was still a bigger, that Avram Avinu could have asked a big question. And he was coming back from Har Moriah fully loaded with that schus, undiminished with any machshava, dibur, or maisa. Now on that Erev Sukkos, Avram Avinu wanted to buy Ma'oras HaMachpelah. Now he could have come and said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me the land. It's mine. I don't have to pay you or deal with you. And it was the same reason that David HaMelech paid for Har HaBayis later on. And that 1,500 years later, after Avram, he insisted on paying for Har HaBayis for the same reason. That when you're dealing with the world, you have to be above and beyond reproach. He knew very well that there would come a day if he just claimed the ownership because Israel, Eretz Yisrael, was given to him and promised to him, that there would be an entire debate at some point about who has the right to the place. But once there was a shtar, an actual contract, an actual payment, he knew that he stopped and prevented any type of a discussion even about whether it belonged to the Yidden Chevron, Ma'oras HaMachpelah, to the Yidden. Now, we know that the Bnei Ches owned the area, and Ephron was their representative to deal with Avram. Now, if you look at Ephron's name in the Parsha, every time it is mentioned, there is a Vav in Ephron. Except for the last time that he's mentioned, there's no Vav, it's Choser, missing the Vav. And if you look in Rashi, who quotes the Chazal, that Amar Harbe, Ephron said a lot. What is this? Wow, please, you are a prince amongst us. We will do for you, take whatever you want. But the bottom line was, he said a lot, but did very, very little. He was a big talker, but when it came to the practicality of the bottom line, he not only did not say, oh, be my guest, take the piece of land, it's yours. Oh, no. He not only took money, but he took a price that the Chazal say that whatever it was worth, it was double or triple the value. This 400 Arba Meo shekel kesef was the most exorbitant price for that land at that time. But Avram Avinu said, no problem. Here it is. He brought, and it was over la socher, which means that it was currency that every country and everyone respected and accepted. It wasn't just some local money that, oh, well, that in Eretz Yisrael or in the United States or wherever it was, New Zealand, that currency is not, that's over la socher. That was accepted by every merchant worldwide, the value of what he paid. What do we learn from this story with Ephron and Avram Avinu? Talk less and do more. That we sometimes have the eloquence of diction and we're able to conjure up a very beautiful conversation, and there's nothing wrong with that. But make sure that what you actually do in your negotiations, your conversations, your communications is more than all of the talk. Don't be a big talker and a short comer on what you produce. Now the Torah at that point stresses that somebody whose whole life is money never will have enough money. And that's what the Chazal say on this Ephron. The talk and the courtesies were unbelievable, magnificent. But all he was interested was in receiving the most money. And the Chazal say that somebody who has $500,000 in the bank, but all he's talking about is he lost this opportunity to make tremendous money, and he lost that opportunity. And every conversation, his whole frame of mind is centered around money. So whether he's got 500,000, 5 million, or 50 million, it'll never be enough. And that a person should train himself to focus. I mean, look, we all need money. We have to pay our bills. Money is essential in our life. The schusim we get from tzedakah is through money. The schusim we get through chesed is money. You give people food, you give people your time, which is money. But train yourself to realize that no matter how much money you have, you're not taking it with you. And that as much money as you have was a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be able to uplift and enrich yourselves by doing the right thing with all of the money. Now, the Parsha then shifts to a story of Eliezer, who was asked by Avram Avinu to go find a shidduch for his son Yitzchak. Now, he told him, and the Torah says about Eliezer, HaMoishel b'chol asher lo, that means Eliezer was in charge of Avram Avinu's staff, all of his cattle and his possessions, all of his money, and he was trustworthy and he was a loyal servant of Avram Avinu. But when it came to the story of our Sedra, of finding the shidduch, there he made him swear. Because a yid in dealing with his money has to be cautious, has to be careful. Time is life, and life translates into the work you put in to gain the wealth, the money, to live, to be able to exist in Olam Hazeh. But at the same token, we have to realize that it is only Gashmias. And a person can't drive himself crazy for more of the Gashmias and do things that shows that his entire frame of mind is around the Gashmias. But Avram Avinu, putting Eliezer in charge of everything, he never asked him to swear loyalty. But when it came to the shidduch for his son, which was asidus, which was future, which was everything that was going to be in the world for Yidden and Klal Yisrael till the Geula Shlema, the shidduch, he made him immediately swear that he will not take a girl for his son Yitzchak from the Canaanim, but to go back. Shuv el Eretz Moladati. Go back to my place of my youth, where I grew up, where I lived. Go back to my family. So Meforshim asked, but the people there where he lived when he was young were also Ovdei Avodah Zarah, just like the Canaanim. So why was he so against his son Yitzchak taking a shidduch from where he was, and not to have to go all the way back to Lavan and to Besuel and to where he lived in his youth? But the Meforshim explain, because yes, both areas and groups served Avodah Zarah, but the quality of the Edelkeit, the character and the essence of their very being was very different. By the Canaanim, they served Avodah Zarah, but they were rotten at the root. And all of the meanness and lack of chesed and their whole attitude to people, how they dealt with them, how they spoke with them, how they, in their everyday lives, was a different world. But where he came from, they served Avodah Zarah. But each and every person had the talent and the backbone of a certain refinedness. And that was exactly what Avram Avinu wanted. Because for Asidus by Klal Yisrael, and that's the reason I told you, if you remember when we were learning in Devarim, the Parsha, and there was a tzivui never to take even the 20th generation, to take Ammon or Moav. Mitzrayim, after the third generation, you could marry. Now the Mitzrayim killed us and what they did to us, but it wasn't equal to the profound indignation that when Moshe Rabbeinu wanted water and bread and he was willing to pay for it, and they said, oh no, you step near our nation, we're going to beat you to a pulp. Baruch Hashem, their words did not come to pass. Klal Yisrael had the... But even Klal Yisrael was offering full payment for the bread and the water. They answered and said, don't come near us. We're not giving you even for full payment any bread or any water. That stems from a mean streak. And that, Moshe Rabbeinu told them, that type of person you cannot marry, because that's embedded in the DNA and they're rotten at the core. So you can't marry into them. And this was the same thing. Avram Avinu did not want from Canaan because they had a terrible mean streak. Now, we know that there's a word in his mission to find the shidduch that Eliezer said in one pasuk, Eli without, spelled just ayin, lamed yud. And Rashi points out Eli ksiv, because he was saying really, Ulai, maybe the girl that I'm going to find won't want to leave the place where she lives and doesn't want to go back to where you, Avram, and Yitzchak live. So then Avram Avinu said, oh, then you're free from the promise and I release you from any obligation or anything. But the last time he said it, when it was still not actually happening, he said, Eli ksiv. Eliezer had a daughter, and he wanted very badly that his daughter should marry Yitzchak. And that's the Eli ksiv. But Avram Avinu told him that you are cursed. He was a descendant of Chum. And Chum was as ugly as could be. He did to his father, he said that if in the world Cain and Hevel were only two brothers, and one killed the other over inheritance, and two brothers in the whole world could not live together, we have already three brothers. And my father wants to have a fourth son? So Noach knew what he did, and he cursed them, and they remain cursed ad hayom hazeh. But the reason why there was this problem was because of jealousy. Who's going to get more? What about the inheritance? I mean, they had the whole world. That wasn't enough for even 3 or 4. But there was a jealousy problem. And when Eliezer finally found the shidduch, he was so, even though he wanted his daughter to marry Yitzhak, but when he saw the simonim that he was looking for, he was so totally happy that there was not a drop of jealousy or the problem that had stemmed from Cain and Hevel or from Chum and his brothers. So once he eradicated the problem that caused all of these bad happenings, he went from the category of cursed to the category of blessed. So he did not remain Oror his whole life at that point. Now, Mefarshim point out a interesting note, because it says that when he first came and Rivka was there bringing the water for the sheep and for the cattle and everything else, that he saw that the water rose up. It had risen to her. He saw it was an open miracle. I mean, when you see water in the lake, you don't see it rise up suddenly. And here by the well and by everything else, he saw the water was rising to her, so she shouldn't have to overexert herself in getting the water. So it was an open miracle. Yet, he didn't say yet that this was the shidduch. That should have been enough of a sign. But later, when she was offering not only the people, but all of the camels, water, and this and that, then he said, now that's it. That I know it's the shidduch. Why wasn't, asked the Mefarshim, the miracle of the water that rose up, and he saw it? Why didn't that complete his mission at that point? But the answer said that we live in Olam Hazeh, and miracles happen every single day. Sometimes we realize it, we see it, and sometimes we don't. We go from day, to week, month to month, and year to year. And there's so many miracles happening around us, and we don't even recognize it. And in Olam Hazeh, bigger than miracles could happen for the person is the daily chesed that the person puts his foot forward to make sure that there is through and through compassion, pity, rachmanis, and every aspect of all of that chesed that goes into it. And it meant more to Eliezer to see the actual daily chesed that was part of this 3-year-old girl's life than to see the water rising, a pure miracle in front of his eyes. An interesting note for all of us to understand. Now, it says that Sarah lived 127 years. Meya Shana, Ve'esrim Shana, 100 years, Ve'esrim Shana, and 20 years, Ve'sheva Shanim, and 7 years. A total of 127. And the Gemara darshans things from it, why it says Shana after each one. It just should have said Meya Ve'esrim Meya Ve'esrim Ve'sheva Shanim. Period. Why did it keep saying after 100 years, 20 years, 7 years? Because there's a drush that is darshan from each one of them. She was like a 20-year-old, it says 100, that even at 100, she was like a 20-year-old that is not responsible for any aveira. She was clean from chet. And 20 like 7, that she was beautiful, like a 7-year-old. So it says each one individually for a reason, and the Gemara gives the reason. But the Gemara also says that she lived 127 years, so her great-great-great-granddaughter, Esther Hamalka, from our story of Purim, reigned over 127 Medinas. That she had the schus to have the power of being able to decide what would and wouldn't happen in all 127 provinces that she as queen was over. I mean, it can't be just because it's the number 127 that this is what stands out and has its rare and remarkable distinction. But the answer that the Chazal say is because Sarah Imenu was always in the back. In other words, Avram took the lead, and she was his lifelong partner to seek out and to accomplish his mission here in Olam Hazeh. She was a loyal wife and Ashes Chayil, par excellence. That she was a role model of dedication and loyalty and focus. But Sarah at one point took a stand when she saw that the bad activity of Yishmael was influencing her son, Yitzchak. She demanded that she be thrown out of the house together with Yishmael. And Avram Avinu was not happy about it, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah Shema b'kola, you do and follow what she's telling you to do. And we know that they were thrown out, they came back. It was a long story there. But despite her posture in her life with her husband, when push came to shove, that bad influence in her household for her son, there's no discussion, and there is absolutely no compromise. Out. So that was a tremendous chus, the Chazal say, for Sarah, because it wasn't that she had strength and that she came with a posture of a sledgehammer every time there was an issue. She always gave in and she always followed Avram. But she set the path of right and wrong. And she wanted that when Esther HaMalka, her great-great-granddaughter, would be dealing with not only people locally, but 127 Medinos, counties, that she wanted to be able to make sure that she set her sights straight and that she was able to know when to put her foot down and when not to put her foot down. And that's why the Gemara makes such a close comparison and brings the numbers 127 she got, because it was direct from Sarah Imenu. Don't forget, Sarah Imenu had the power of full nevuah. Rivka did not, Rachel did not, and neither did Leah. They had Ruach HaKodesh, they had Baskol, and they had a sprinkling of nevuah. But the full-fledged, undiluted power of nevuah was Sarah Imenu. The Gemara says that she was the only neviah of the four imahos, meaning she had the full power. We know that Rivka said nevuah when she said, Lama eshkal gam Shnechem Yom Echad, that she'll lose Yaakov and Esav in one day, and that's what happened. So she was saying Ruach HaKodesh and Baskol, and that sprinkling of Nevuah. But it wasn't the strength of Sarah. And when Sarah saw that she's going to have a great-granddaughter that no other woman in the world, in the history of the world, would have and possess those powers to be able to reign and have the royalty and the majesty over all those countries, that discretion was crucial. And that when yes is yes and when no is no, there is no yielding on it in any which way. Now, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik said that when Yitzchak, when Eliezer finished his mission, and you see that everything is Maisa Avasim Lebanim, he brought these bracelets and that. From that we had the schos of the luchos on Har Sinai, that the tablets, and from the rings, and from the this, and from the asara that we need a minyan. I mean, so many different aspects of every little nuance that was done. But when he finished his mission and he went back, they saw from a distance that Yitzchak was coming Mebe'er Lachai Ro'i. And Mefarshim ask, and the son of the Rambam, Rabbi Avram, he asked a question, who cares where Yitzchak was coming from? Did it make any difference in the context of everything here? In other words, he was bringing Rivka to marry Yitzchak, and they saw him from a distance. What's the difference where he was coming from? But the answer, he said, was a very, very basic, important point, which really served as the backbone of our avodah. And that is that when Yitzchak Avinu, who is the amud, the column, the pillar of avodah, our davening and saying Tillim and doing everything we do with our communication with our Kodesh Baruch Hu, that when Yitzchak went into solitude, and he was in this place called Be'er Lachai Ro'i, he never left for a moment until he completed his Avodas Hashem. There was completion and totality. It means we're in the middle of davening, and you see three people are busy looking at their cell phones. They're in the middle of talking to our Kodesh Baruch Hu, and I'm not criticizing anyone, because in every tzibur you have plus, you have minuses. But in the middle, if they really believe that they're in the middle of talking to our Kodesh Baruch Hu, what? They care about what the telephone says? But we learn, and this is what Rabbi Avram, the son of the Rambam, says, that the shleimus, the totality of being enveloped in the atmosphere of speaking with, pleading with, asking for, but being given the format and the opportunity to converse with our Kodesh Baruch Hu. Yitzchak, we learn, because the pasuk says where he was coming from, because we learned that he was only coming because there was completion. Because even though he sensed that Eliezer was coming with his shidduch, but he didn't turn to come out until he finished in Be'er Lachai Roi, and then he went out to meet them and to put the veil, which is what we do under the chuppah, because as it says, that all the brachas that a husband gives to a wife and that a wife gives to a husband, so when the husband comes to the badekin and he puts the veil over the face of the kala, he at that moment opens up the treasure chest of the gifts from heaven that come from the husband to the wife. And when the wife under the chuppah walks around the chosan, her husband-to-be, she opens up that treasure chest for the things that are going to come from her to him at that moment. And that's why we have the badekin, and that's why we have that. So Yitzchak Avinu, when he saw her, now let's remember that Yitzchak was now 40 years old. And as I told you the Ritva last week, that he went after the Akeidah and spent 2 years in heaven. So those 2 years didn't count, because it says in Kabbalah Sfarim that the neshama that Yitzchak had and that Rivka had were exchanged by the Akeidah and his 2 years in heaven. And had he remained with the original neshama, he would not have been able to do a shidduch, and that's why he didn't do a shidduch until then, say the Mekubalim. And now he came back from heaven, and he was now 40 years old, and she was able to have that unity between herself and Yitzchak, because now was min hashamayim the shatova u'mitzlachas, that they could be married. Now, when Sarah Imenu was nifter, it says, and Rashi brings it, that there were 3 things that disappeared from Avram Avinu's house or his tent. And one of the things was the fact that when Sarah Imenu benched licht, Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov, that the licht remained the entire week, a siman bracha of lichtigkeit, the light and the positivity of all the good which light represents versus darkness. It remained an entire week. But when she was nifter, the light was extinguished, and even though Avram Avinu, he himself went and continued to bench licht, but it didn't remain the entire week. There was something was not there. But when Yitzchak took Rivka into the tent of his mother, and now she took over the benching licht, the light, the ner, remained the entire week, just like for Sarah Imenu. So something that could not be accomplished by Avram Avinu was able to happen by a 3-year-old girl who came into a shidduch pure. You could understand that there was lots of immorality, and Chazal say, the pasuk says, that ve'ish lo yada, that no man ever was intimate with her under any circumstances of being intimate, that she remained pure and holy to be able to be, and even the Arizal and all the Kabbalah say that Yitzchak received the neshama of Adam Arishon and Rivka was Chava. And there are many reasons, things that happened in the history of Klal Yisrael, that she was the one to be able to make happen the brachas, the birchas Yaakov, that Yitzchak gave to Yaakov Avinu, and in turn he could be moiled. The Shivtei Kor, the 12 tribes. Avram Avinu didn't have the 12 tribes, and neither did Yitzchak. But Yaakov Avinu did. And it was because he was empowered by the power of the brachas of Yitzchak Avinu. And how did it happen? It was the arrangement of how things should be by Rivka that this all came about. And without her total purity, it never would have happened. So we have to, in our daily lives, be realists, try to daven better, try to do more chesed, to try to learn Torah more, but the purity factor, to be able to etch it into the essence of our children and our families, is the backbone of how Klal Yisrael was able to achieve and to be able at the plateau of where they rode high all of the years despite all of the cruelty of the world, and how they will be able to bask in the glory and luster of the Geula Shalema.